This episode is sponsored by the upcoming benefit for Riley Hospital for Children, the 24-hour Extra Life Board Gaming Marathon, and by eLuxury Supply. Use offer code EvansvillePodcast10 at checkout to save 10% on your order at eluxurysupply.com. Hello and welcome to Evansville Podcast. My name is Jason Burton. Thank you for listening. On this episode, First Presbyterian's Director of Music, Robert Nicholls, joins me to discuss the upcoming event where he will provide live pipe organ accompaniment to classic silent films, The Golem, or Golem, as he says, on Friday, October 14th, and Nosferatu on Saturday, October 15th. Admission is free, but donations will be collected to support the choir school of First Presbyterian Church. First Presbyterian is located at 609 Southeast 2nd Street in downtown Evansville. As you may know, doing this podcast introduces me to a lot of interesting companies and people. For example, did you know one of the top-selling bedding companies on Amazon is based right here in Evansville? They're called eLuxury Supply. They sell sheets and beds and mattress pads and dog beds and really all kinds of stuff for the home, for every room in the home. They're on Amazon and they sell through their own website at eluxurysupply.com. In fact, I ordered 2 of these mattresses last year over the internet and didn't even realize the company was in Evansville. I was so happy to learn that eLuxury Supply mattresses were great mattresses and from Evansville. I mean, seriously, no bells, no whistles, they just give you a great night's sleep. And they've sold thousands of these things now. Great customer reviews, just glowing. Did you know about this? Actually, I think the word needs to get out about how great eLuxury Supply is. But I'll tell you, now that we know some of the best mattresses out there come from Evansville, I'll be bragging about them myself. That's eluxurysupply.com, just a great mattress for people who like great night's sleep. Use offer code EvansvillePodcast10 to save 10% on your order. Offer ends January 1st, 2017. Also wanted to let you know, St. Peter's Highland UCC will be hosting its 5th annual 24-hour Extra Life Board Gaming Marathon as a benefit for Riley Hospital for Children across the weekend of October 21st through October 23rd. Sponsored players and guests will be playing for over 60 board games donated by board game publishers and the community for at least 24 total hours to raise money for Indiana's only Children's Miracle Network hospital. This year's board game marathon will feature a silent auction with items ranging from board games to crafts to tickets to gift cards and hotel stays. It will also have the 4th annual World Series of Clabber. If you think you're good at Clabber, come prove it and play Evansville's game for Indiana's kids. And that's not all. We have a Boom Boom Balloon tournament, Wits and Wagers game show dinner, and much, much more. Donate to Riley or join the team as a sponsored player, or just stop by over the weekend and play some games and help heal sick and injured kids. Details can be found on St. Peter's Board Game Marathon's Extra Life page at www.extra-life.org/team/St. Peter's Game Night. Or email Jim Jones, the Extra Life team captain, at jim@greatbigtable.com. So sorry, you were saying someone thought you were from Australia?
Yeah, so the alumni choir I was at Cambridge University and graduated from there just over 20 years ago, and we brought that choir back here to Evansville.
Yeah.
And they were saying, well, you know, your accent has changed a little bit. Of course, they didn't know me 20 years ago because they weren't born. But they said, yeah, you do definitely have a hint of Australian in there. I'm not sure that I hear it myself. I think it sounds probably pretty kosher. British accent.
I would say it's very not Evansville. I'll give you that.
Definitely. That. People always say, where are y'all from? And, or, you know, and I, depending on what mood I'm in, I'll say, well, you know, do you want to have a guess?
Right.
And most often they say, yeah, New Zealand or Australia. But I've had some pretty fun ones too. Yeah, there was somebody who said to me once, are you from Switzerland? And I said, no, I'm not from Switzerland. And then, you know, the next attempt was Norway. Yeah. So, I mean, they had I was really glad that they'd heard of those countries. But no, that's not where my accent's from.
Fair enough. So clearly not from Evansville.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. So where is it that you're from?
Well, I grew up in rural Cambridgeshire, which is about 70 miles north of London, about an hour north of London. Out on a farm. I grew up, this time of year, I was driving combine harvesters and doing carting corn and all that sort of stuff. But my mother is from southern Illinois, Carmi, Illinois. It's the center of the universe. Yeah,
sure,
I'm always
absolutely.
meeting people who know exactly where Carmi is and maybe have some relatives in White County. But
there you go.
So my mother's from there, and my parents actually next year celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Oh, wow. And I was born and raised in the UK and moved here to Evansville 20 years ago. But I spent a year here between high school and university and kind of got partially integrated into the musical community at the University of Evansville. And it was the year that the organ that I now play at First Presbyterian Church was installed and dedicated. So there was a lot of excitement around that. And so then 5 years later, I got the full-time job.
Okay. And so we're here to talk about the upcoming silent movies that it's October 14th and 15th.
That's right.
And you play the organ during the movie.
Yeah, so I make up a soundtrack for the movie as it plays.
Right. Yeah. Now, my family went last year for the Phantom of the Opera one, and I'm sure that was... Have you done that before with that movie, or was that the first time you've done
No, actually, that was the second one. I think this is the 6th year I've done this. So the very first year I did Nosferatu, and then I've also done The Phantom of the Opera, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and this year, for the first time, I'm doing the Golem. And my wife said to me, my favourite was the Phantom of the Opera. When are you going to do that one again? And so last year we added a second night on the Saturday. Because, if I only ever do it on Friday, people who aren't available on Friday can never come. True. So we had a great audience come for Phantom of the Opera on Saturday night. So I'm kind of repeating one that I've done before on the Saturday night, but the new one's on Friday. Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before, but we just moved down here last year, so a lot of the stuff we didn't know about, and it's within walking distance from us, so that there's not much excuse to show up, and the price was right too, because it is free to attend, but donations are welcome.
Donations are very welcome, and they help support children in the church going to summer music camps. So we really appreciate the support, and they really appreciate it, and they get some really fantastic mountaintop experiences for a week somewhere else in the country. Yeah,
and this organ is it's worth checking out in person. I'll say that it's monstrous.
Well, it's. There are larger instruments about, but it's quite imposing in its demeanor, and it's not shy, and but it has many individually beautiful colors and sounds, that kind of imitate orchestral instruments, and then of course it all comes together, full organ when you pull all the stops out. It's not shy. Yeah, it really gets going, and it's why this particular instrument. This is why I moved continent to live in the US. Is that I'd done a lot of playing of organs, in England, around Europe, and so on and so forth during high school. And when I moved here, and this organ was dedicated, and I got to play it for the first time, I knew from the outset that this was a really special instrument. And it's one of the big draws that drew me here in the first place. It's all handmade by a company of artisans in Gloucester, Massachusetts called Fisk, CB Fisk Incorporated, and they're one of the few companies in the country or even in the world. They mix their own metals and melt it and pour it out and shape the pipes, and they do everything themselves in-house. So everything in it is handmade. When you look at it, all of the woodwork is hand-carved. All of the pipe metal has been hammered by hand. All of the pipes have been individually voiced to make sure they sound just right. So a lot of work and effort went into it. And in fact, it was a 10-year process for the church to get this particular organ builder into our community. and to get them to build it. So it's a great testament to the community and to the church that they invested such amount of time and money in getting this instrument. And I would say that it's been very helpful in sort of helping to transform our community into a vibrant artistic place. The church has a very open door policy. We try to use our instruments and make it available to as many people as much as possible.
Right.
And so it's not just ours. It truly is for everybody around.
Yeah. Now, how are the differences between, like, say someone plays piano versus organ? If you know how to play piano, can you pick up the organ, or is it like a completely different thing?
Well, it is a keyboard instrument. Mm-hmm. The one there at First Pres happens to have 2 keyboards, but the largest organs in the world have, I think, in Atlantic City there are 7 keyboards.
Yeah. Wow.
And of course, the big difference is there are pedals. Mm-hmm. A pipe organ doesn't have strings; it doesn't have that percussive effect. And of course, an organ, when you press the key, the note sounds. Depending on what stops are drawn, those are the individual levers that allow air into certain levels of pipes. So, a pianist can sit down and play piano music on the organ, but it's going to sound like an organ playing piano music. And similarly, an organist. I mean, we're all keyboard players, so I think a lot of us are kind of multidisciplinary in that way. We play the piano, we play the harpsichord, the clavichord, the spinet, the pipe organ,
right.
Digital pipe organ. We're pretty flexible people.
Yeah, and that's what you went to school for, is music, or was there something else?
When you say school,
university,
I studied music at Cambridge, and in fact, it's more a course in musicology than practical music making. So I went to lots of lectures, and I learnt to write fugues and lots of harmony and counterpoint and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But I sang in my college choir at Gonville and Keys. So I actually primarily was a singer in college. I was primarily an organist in high school, and then they've come together in a very happy marriage here at First Pres. So I'm the choir director. So my musical singing, my vocal background is very helpful in terms of directing the choir and training children's voices. Sure. I was a chorister at Westminster Abbey myself. So from the age of 8 to 13, I basically had a more than part-time job singing at Westminster Abbey. So like where Will and Kate got married.
Okay, yeah.
That's the choir I sang in. That's the church where I lived and worked in elementary, kind of through the beginning of middle school. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
That's a pretty interesting. I mean, that's hard to wrap your head around, because see things on TV. It's like, who even does that? But you do that, apparently.
That's right. So I did that as a child.
Yeah,
I was singing 20 hours a week, and we sang 8 services in the Abbey every week. 3 on a Sunday, and we had 1 day off. Wednesday we didn't sing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But, when you're 8 years old and you don't know any better, it's just, you just get on with it.
That is true. Kids can adapt to a lot of things. They're
absolutely
very resilient. So whenever you put together the music, you said it's kind of an improv style, I guess, maybe for playing with the music that you do for the movies. Do you practice? I mean, do you watch the movie a lot and then say, okay, here's the vibe, I think I got it?
Exactly, okay. Yeah. So I sit down, I watch the movie a number of times, and I learn kind of the scene changes and who's coming up. And what I try to do is I either create or assign a theme to each character.
Oh, okay.
And then as the movie progresses, those themes change and alter, and people can kind of pick up, kind of like leitmotifs in a Wagner opera or something like that. And so as the movie progresses, those themes change and develop, and maybe there's a kind of overarching theme or harmonic progression that I use to kind of tie the whole movie together. So I do this in a more classical style rather than I'll call it a theatre organ style. The instrument that I'm playing is a very classical instrument. And I improvise in a kind of, in a modern idiom, kind of a 20th century. It's heavily influenced by French music of the earlier 20th century and German music of the 19th century. And I kind of tie it all together with my own musical language that I'm most comfortable with. Okay. And my fingers can kind of do that. I mean, I could sit down and just improvise for an hour and a half with no movie playing.
Right.
But it's more fun to do it with the movie.
Oh yeah.
Because there are characters, there's movement, there's development, and I had done a lot of improvising, and I had a friend, he kept saying, have you done a movie yet? Have you done a movie yet? Oh, it's such fun. You'll really, really enjoy it. And so 6 years ago, I decided, okay, I'll do it. Nosferatu, the first Dracula movie. And I honestly thought, well, if it's a complete fiasco, and at the end of it, everybody goes, not so sure about that, never coming again. But the church was absolutely packed. It was like Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
300 people came. And at the end, when I let go of the final chord, they just went absolutely nuts and loved it. And I thought, well, there we go. All right, I guess I can do that. And I've enjoyed doing that ever since. And I occasionally I'm asked to do it outside of Evansville too.
Oh, okay. So speaking of outside of Evansville, since you're not from here, a question I usually like to ask is, what's something that we don't have that you wish we had? And I think you may have a unique perspective on this.
Oh my goodness. Well, if I were to arrive, so let me back up 20 years. When I first moved here, I remember just being kind of outraged or not comprehending how you could stack up so much soft drink in one place. And I mean, there was a Santa's grotto in Schnucks made of cases of Coca-Cola. And I just remember thinking, this is obscene.
Yeah.
This is obscene. There's kind of a little lack of moderation. Other things that foreigners notice is that Americans make vast amounts of trash compared to individuals in other. There's so much packaging and stuff. We have 96-gallon trash cans.
Yeah,
and they're kind of family of four fills one of those every week, and that would be considered pretty outrageous. Unfortunately, recycling is kind of taking off a little bit better here in town. But
hopefully that's changed a little. Since
reduce, reuse, recycle, please, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see, what else do you notice? Well, I've got to be very careful here. There are guns in America. Where I come from, the police were not armed. So that's still striking to me. I still think that, I'm just as likely, I'm more likely to be shot just walking down the street here, or that's as likely to happen as being in a car wreck or something. But anyway, I don't want to get in that. That's a very much a political hot potato.
It is.
But outsiders look on that with just they can't believe that they can't comprehend it. Don't understand it at all.
Sure.
Unless you're coming from an active war zone where people really. Need weapons to. Anyway, different conversation.
That's a different podcast
for a different day.
Do a different episode.
Let's see what else do you notice as being an outsider. There are lots of fast food, lots of food choices.
Sure.
I'll never forget a friend of mine came to visit me, and he came through the Chicago airport about 10 years ago, and he said, "You know what? I landed in Chicago, and it was like showing up at an obesity convention." There's still a lot of that going on, and of course now in the UK, it's almost as bad.
Yeah.
But growing up I grew up in the 70s and 80s in the UK. There were very, very few overweight people from generally poor diets,
right.
So that's something that because of course you look left when you cross the road. I mean that one's pretty basic.
That was but hopefully you've transitioned past that.
Yeah. Got past that one now.
Yeah.
Let's see what else you notice. There's a lot more space in this country in general.
Yeah, sure.
And that means that as Americans, and I am an American citizen, I should say.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had dual citizenship.
I do have dual citizenship, and of course living in America, I'm not I don't sound like a Hoosier.
No.
I do know what basketball is, but I still notice that there's a lot more open spaces. But that also means that as a country with these open spaces, that we don't really respect them. In the UK, it's such a much smaller country. The entire UK population is 65 million people, and they're crammed into an area the size of Oregon.
Right.
And so the towns and cities are much, much closer together, and they guard their green spaces much more carefully. So it's kind of disappointing around here every once in a while to just sort of see sprawling out when there's so much regeneration that could occur within the city limits. And no, we'll just scalp some more trees or scalp some more extremely productive farmland, and just put a strip mall out there or something.
Right.
So I think foreigners notice those sorts of things, and it's still sort of part of my core value, having grown up in a rural and agrarian area, to try to protect those areas, because I think once they're gone, South Green River Road is never going to be prime agricultural land again.
Right.
It should be redeveloped, or South Kentucky Avenue, or whichever area it is. Yeah, it doesn't matter where it is.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned knowing what basketball was. Were you into sports over there? Because not a lot of people necessarily have to be into sports, but I seem to come across people that don't care for sports more and more now. But is there was it cricket or football?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. My brother is nuts about sport. My father is nuts about sport. I kind of was off doing my own music thing and learning about obscure composers from the 15th century and getting excited about that.
There you go.
But I kind of pay attention. I read the sports pages. I know that the UK, the England football manager has been ousted after 67 days on the job because he was, he was caught being naughty and accepting bribes and payments and all that sort of stuff. And
who could have thought there'd be corruption in sports?
That's right, in football.
It's so weird.
And in soccer.
It's so weird.
Well, it's a bit the pot calling the kettle black in that case, because the Football Association in England has been throwing the mud around at FIFA for being so corrupt, and then you turn around and they're just the same.
Yeah, well, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, I guess. But
is that your motto?
That's some motto. I'll put it that way. That's somewhat not necessarily mine. Those things that I say don't necessarily represent my views.
Oh, okay.
But okay, so back to music then. I like that when people are into music, as you are into music, but it's not necessarily current music. I wonder what you listen to, or what do you like to listen to? Because it can't just all be classical, right?
It's mostly classical.
Okay.
There is so much classical. There's as much light and darkness in classical music as there is between Christina Aguilera and hip hop. Mm-hmm. There's a vast rainbow of both old extant music and new music being performed. So I actually listen to quite a lot of new classical music that's written in the 21st century. I listen to a lot of the BBC Radio 3. I listen to proms concerts. But I also listen to, obviously quite a lot of organ music, choral music. Yeah. I try to listen to as wide a variety of music as I can. And I recently drove to North Carolina, and I would press the scan button on my radio, and I would go up and I would listen to the entirety of whatever song was playing and the following song, and then I would skip up to the next radio station. Yeah. And I heard a very wide variety of Christian pop, country music is of course very popular around here, and there's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But I wouldn't say that I necessarily know the names of the most famous musicians of the day.
If I were to ask for some musical homework here, what are a couple of either songs or artists that you would recommend? In popular music? No, for you, music? for whatever you like. If you're this is my favorite, or I think this would express, my interest or something. Is there a certain
Well, I'm a particular fan of the particularly early organ music of and actually all of his music of a French composer called Olivier Messiaen, who was born 110 years ago, and he died in 1992. And he's quite influential on me as a thinker about music. He was a great teacher in Paris. I'm a sucker for Mahler symphonies. I think they're some of the most beautiful and expressive music ever written. I love Bach and his predecessors, and I love vocal music. I love choral music. I love solo vocal music. I grew up in a tradition where I sang 40 or 50 different pieces of vocal music every week. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I listen to I have pretty wide, fairly eclectic.
Yeah, I mean that's a category I know very, very little about, except for the the heavy hitters, I guess, like you mentioned Bach or Mozart or Beethoven, the obvious ones. So I'm always curious, just when someone's knowledgeable to find out what's the real
where's the real gems. Yeah, I love Wagner. I love the if you've got a few hours to spare, it'd be great to sit down to listen all the way through to a Wagner opera or something. But I have children and a wife, and I have to eat.
Well, there's that. Yeah, and then do you like? Some people prefer listening on, say, record player like vinyl, or the new stuff like you just throwing it on your phone or whatever in headphones. Is there a preference there, or do you?
Well, I think it's definitely. I mean, the whole concept of listening to music has changed over the last 30 years. It used to be that you listen to a small amount of music, and the whole concept was hi-fi, high fidelity. What is the closest reproductive equipment that I can get? And I will spend a lot of money on it to listen to the closest reproduction of actually being there in the recording studio, or actually being there in the live performance that's being recorded. And that's now completely changed around. The whole concept now is to consume as much music as you can of questionable reproductive quality. Right. So an MP3 at 256 kp kilobits per second. There's no way that can compete with 8-foot Magnapans and a Denon amplifier and a preamplifier and a vinyl or a turntable. I own quite a few CDs, classical CDs. I started collecting them back when I was a teenager, and occasionally I'll still buy CDs. But probably if I were to make a recording now, I'd probably just release it digitally and maybe not even make CDs. Yeah. But then I think there's something, I'm still of that generation, Gen X, where we like tangible things. We like to hold real books. Right. We like to smell real food. We like to live in the real world, I think most of us. And I think a lot of the world around us that we see is becoming so virtual that it's, virtual literally means unreal, doesn't it? Right. And somehow I generally prefer to live in the real world. Yeah.
I was just thinking about that the other day. So I was looking through, we have some records, and I was just looking through, and I remember from growing up in childhood, my parents had a lot of albums that I would just stare at the covers while I was listening to the record. And, that was what I did. I just listened to the music and looked at the cover and read the liner notes or whatever. And I would just not even consider doing that now.
Well, but consider this. You remember that. It was a tactile experience. You could actually, you could smell the paper if it was slightly, on that album cover. And I can remember looking at the album cover of Hooked on Classics, or my older brother had Eye of the Tiger on a 45, yes. And we would play with it. We would spin it at 16 RPM and 33 and 45 and up to 78, and a lot of those tactile experiences that child psychologists now tell us are very important. I hope that we're not the last generation that really gets to experience those things, and how it. I think humans' brains are going to change a lot here in the next 50 years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting times for sure. Yeah. We'll be able to just upload everything, and it's like the Matrix.
So getting back to this movie, I play a living, breathing organ, and folk are in the room watching the movie, and they're surrounded by real music, and there are real pipes in the organ, and they move real air. And I think that there's the instrument in there can literally shake the pews. I mean, you'll feel the pews moving to the pulsations of the music. So I think it's a very real experience, and I think that's why people like it.
And it's that shared experience that we don't have a lot. Because have a group of people together experiencing something it's not going to happen again, right? I mean, you're playing. You will never probably play that song that way, or all of the soundtrack, the backing soundtrack. It will never be played that way again,
right?
So,
and if there is an excellent soundtrack that say was added to the movie in the 1920s when the talkies came out, I'm not playing that either. Right, I'm doing entirely my own thing.
Yeah, and even if we recorded it, it's still different live. There's something, and I don't know what necessarily that is, but there's that. It's that experience that
and it's quite different from me in the performance as well, because there's an audience there and they're watching the movie, and they respond to different things than what I respond to. So they might find something quite funny that I hadn't thought was funny, and of course the melodramatic acting that the actors had to do back then. They couldn't talk. And it's in black and white, and so they are portraying everything, with the lift of an eyebrow or a blink or a smirk or a change or the smallest actions. And of course, there are intertitles where there's no action at all and there's just text up on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing.
So what do I do during the text? Well, I just continue.
You just play here's the text theme. Right?
Yeah, or I'll continue in the evoking the emotion or continuing the story or, sort of maybe filling in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I kind of create, in some ways I create a series of structures depending on the scenes. So I try to create, a musical structure which is obviously overarching, but it's also broken up into smaller sections. So there might be some ABA stuff going on, or there may be other themes that come in, but it's part of maybe a series of variations if there's a big, long, rolling development of material. So trying to, and then I kind of stitch it all together with some not exactly fill in, but again, commentary on what's going on in the action.
Cool. Well, it's a worthwhile experience. If someone hasn't been that's listening, please go, because it's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it here in town.
It just doesn't happen. Yeah. So.
There are some folks around who do. I think there's a gentleman up in Bloomington, and there's a dear friend of mine. He's up in Toronto. A man called David Briggs, who's kind of my inspiration for this. And at St. James Episcopal Cathedral, I think it is. But he runs around the world playing. I think he's now done 283 Phantom of the Operas.
Wow.
And it's different every time.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, it's at 7:00 on Friday the 14th. I'm going to do the Golem, which I haven't done before. And then 7:00 on Saturday the 15th will be Nosferatu.
All right.
Yeah, so read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the film basically follows the first half of that book.
Okay.
Really, I mean, almost sentence by sentence, scene by scene, and then you'll understand the action pretty clearly.
Cool. Well, thanks. I appreciate you coming over here, Robert.
Oh, you're very welcome. And, thanks for having me, Jason.
Hopefully, people will still like to hear my voice after hearing yours, because I'm always jealous of cool voices. So.
You're welcome. Anytime, I'll come and say, the quick fox jumped over the lazy dog.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. And make sure you go to evansvillepodcast.com for show notes, links to the Facebook events, and the church's website as well for this information from this episode. Also, check out our previous episode where we discussed a new Evansville Podcast Network that Josh Petrowski, Clark Osborne, Laura Burton, and I are launching. So definitely check out that episode. And as always, good job, everybody.